Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the regular City Council meeting of the DeKalb City Council, August 12, 2019. Prior to our roll call this evening, I would like to remind anyone who is in the audience, and I notice we have a nice size audience tonight, anyone who would like to speak to an item on the agenda, or for that matter, on any item not on the agenda, to kindly fill out a speaker request form, get that to our city clerk, Lynn Fazekas, who will get it to me, and will certainly attempt to get you on at the appropriate time. And for those of you, when we get to the item on the agenda, public participation, if you would prefer to speak to whatever you'd like to speak on, at that time you may, or if you'd like to wait until we get to the item on the agenda, you're more than welcome to do that also. But just at one point, either during public participation or during the point on the agenda. So, having said that, I would like City Clerk Lynn Fazekas to call the roll call, please.
Morris.
Here.
Finucane.
Here.
Smith.
Here.
Fagan.
Here.
McAdams.
Here.
Verbit.
Here.
Favor.
Here.
Mayor Smith.
Here.
8 present.
Thank you. Several weeks ago, the City of DeKalb, through the efforts of a number of folks, felt that we needed as a community to have a forum which would allow citizens to give their viewpoints on some of the immigration issues, specifically some of the conditions of young people at our nation's border. It was a very, very well-attended meeting. I think Alderman McAdams, you were there. I think I attended. But during that evening at the Memorial Clock, two folks, brother and sister team from DeKalb, did a couple of musical numbers, and I could just sense that the feeling, the passion of what they were singing and the tone of the music really resonated with the folks who were at that meeting that night. And so I reached out to the sister team, who I knew before, Jen Conley. She's a singer and songwriter. I've known her as the music therapist and counselor. She's currently employed with Journey Care Hospice, which rolled out of a sale by Northwestern Medicine. And for years, Jen has utilized her music in clinical settings for healing, building connections as a tool to work with others with struggles and change. Her brother, Joe, is a 25-year veteran of the International Folk Circuit, and one of the reasons that Jen wanted Joe to come along, especially tonight, is that he's been on a 3 or 4 week tour to Ireland and other spots, and now he's back in DeKalb for a short time. And he's noted for his unique blending of beauty and social consciousness, and he's appeared all over the country, and he's got a wonderful voice along with his sister Jen. So what I've asked them to do tonight prior to our Pledge of Allegiance is to ask them to come forward. Jen and Joe, if you'd come up here, face the audience, and honor us and honor this country with your singing of America the Beautiful.
Skies, for amber waves of grain.
o'er purple mountains, majesties above the fruited plain. America, America, God shared His grace on thee, and crowned thy good with brotherhood from sea to shining sea. Oh, beautiful for heroes fruit in liberating strife, who more than self their country love and mercy more than life. America, America, God shed His grace on thee, and crowned thy good with brotherhood from sea to shining sea. Oh, beautiful for patriotry that sees beyond the years, whose alabaster cities gleam, undimmed by human tears. America, America, God shared His grace on thee, and crowned thy good with brotherhood from sea to shining sea. Oh, beautiful for spacious skies, for amber waves of grain, for purple mountains, majesties of the fruited plain. America, America, God shed His grace on thee, and crowned thy good with brotherhood from sea to shining sea. Jen and Joe Jenks Conley. Thank you, Jen. Thank you, Joe. And now if you'd kindly rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you kindly. There are plenty of seats up here in front if anybody is looking for a seat. So, the first item on the agenda, or the third item on the agenda tonight, is the approval of tonight's agenda. Are there any additions or deletions or changes to tonight's agenda? Alderman Verbeek.
Mayor, I would like to make a motion to move item L, ordinances, to follow item G, consent agenda.
Second.
So it's been moved by Alderman Verbeek, seconded by Alderman McAdams, that we move the ordinances first reading, and there are, I think, 3 of those tonight, right after our consent agenda. I think that would be a good idea because I think quite a few of the folks that I've noted already would like to speak to one or more of those ordinances. So it's been moved and seconded that we move that up closer right after the consent agenda. Any discussion? If not, let's see if council would approve of those suggested changes. Alderman Verbeek, roll call, please.
Fanouken,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
Fagan,
Yes.
McAdams.
Yes.
Verbic,
Yes.
Favor,
Yes.
Morris,
Yes.
Mayor Smith.
Yes.
8 ayes.
Thank you. So for those of you who have an agenda, a printed agenda in the audience, we will be moving our ordinances section from near the back of tonight's agenda, somewhere up near the front after our consent agenda. Okay, let's move along to public participation. Now, I have a number of folks who would like to speak to items on the agenda, and I don't see anyone here other than possibly Mark Charvat, who would like to speak to any item at this point on the agenda. Again, you may speak at this point, or if you'd like to wait until we get to one of the ordinance sections, you may. Mark, am I correct in saying that you'd like to speak now? Bessie, would you like to also? Yeah, okay. And Bessie, you're going to be speaking for someone else? Yes, okay, good. Okay, Mark Charvat, please.
Just want to speak on the topic of closed session meetings in general. 3 weeks ago in this chamber, there was a closed session meeting on a subject that is viewed by the state's attorney general as warranting more investigation as to the legitimacy of the topic of the meeting, specifically the topic of the city clerk that was discussed in the closed session. The attorney general, there has been a form filed with the attorney general to look into this. They've responded to me indicating they are going to ask for further information, that this does warrant an investigation. The possibility, it's up to them to decide, of whether this meeting was legitimate or illegitimate. So I remind you, when you schedule these closed session meetings, please follow the statutes of the Open Meetings Act. Tonight, I hope when we hear from the council discuss the next set of items which you moved up on the agenda, that we have a lively discussion. I cannot stand it when there's a subject of great interest to the public that does not get debate and discussion. So I'm hoping to hear from each and every one of the council members when we discuss the L section items. One other thing I want to bring up, something that happened this past weekend. Most of you probably got an alert on your phone yesterday morning if you signed up for the City of DeKalb alert program. The alert came at 8:07 in the morning. However, there was nothing on any official DeKalb police or City of DeKalb social media until 8:45. The City of DeKalb social media had no coverage of this whatsoever. I think in this day and age, it's important that important alerts like this be also presented on social media in a timely manner, especially something this important. So just a quick note, perhaps we can discuss with the police chief about this going forward. The alert did come from the police department, but that came at 8:45, and a lot of people do not sign up for the program, and I encourage everybody to sign up for the program, but there's a lot of people who are not going to do that. So if we can be a little more current with how people use social media and get this information out quickly, that would be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. And I understand, Bessie, you want to speak for Kay Shelton, is that correct?
Yes,
Bessie Chronopoulos.
if that's okay, Mayor.
Yeah, and I would like to remind everyone as you come forward tonight, either here or wherever, is try to keep your comments to 3 minutes or less. I've been sort of the timekeeper ogre, if you will, over the past several weeks because I've had to cut a few people off, so I don't want to do that. Try to keep your comments to 3 minutes or less. So you're the test case, Bessie.
I timed it, so it's
Yeah,
much
right.
less. So.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm speaking on behalf of Kay Shelton, who could not be here. She's working second shift, and this is in regards to the items that are coming up later in the agenda. Okay, DeKalb has a reputation for being unfriendly to business. That is not because of the hours the city clerk holds. Good businesses appreciate transparency. Good businesses want to be assured that there will be no games played, favors will not be given to insiders, deals will not be done behind closed doors without public scrutiny, and that there are no hints of corruption. The people of DeKalb overwhelmingly voted twice, showing that they wanted the clerk's position to remain elected. A previous council went around what the people wanted by keeping the clerk's position elected, but they dropped the salary with no doubt hopes of discouraging the very best qualified people to run for office. Former Alderman Bertrand Simpson warned a previous council that dropping the clerk's pay would lower than $60,000 it once paid would mean DeKalb would not get anything more than a hack. A previous council then further neutered the elected city clerk's position by dropping the pay to a very low level and making it part-time with no doubt hopes that no one would want the job. This latest attempt is nothing more than a power grab by the city manager, who apparently wants complete control over all city's documents and all employees who perform clerk duties. Both the city manager's proposal and the so-called Alderman Finucane compromise continue to remove duties away from the city clerk. Both are the opposite of what DeKalb needs. DeKalb needs an independent set of eyes reviewing documents which would ensure potential business owners, especially those coming from outside DeKalb, that everyone's paperwork will be checked for accuracy and processed efficiently without insider political games. Thank you on behalf of Kay.
Thank you. And I do have a copy of that.
Yeah, everybody does that.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, is there anyone in the audience who had, okay, Dwayne, you'd like to speak now. Yeah, if you'd like to speak now, or if you'd like to wait until the item on the agenda, you're more than welcome to. This is Dwayne Brown, and you'd like to talk on amending Chapter 3, City Clerk.
Yes.
Please.
The city clerk is usually the first person a visitor to the city meets. This first impression can be a good one or a bad one. We need to make it a good one by making it a full-time elected position. One of the clerk's main responsibilities should be keeping the office open for the transaction of city business 8 hours a day, the same as other city administrative departments. During the last 7 years, elected and appointed city clerks have alternated in an erratic pattern. We need to put stability back into the position by creating a full-time clerk at a fair salary of $68,000 a year. Voters have twice before turned down referendums by the city to switch from elected clerk to an appointed one. The position of the city clerk should be an elected one to protect the rights of the citizens that elected him. The November 2012 referendum vote on electing the clerk was overwhelmingly in favor of keeping it an elected office. Eric Olson, the general manager of the Chronicle, in his column in the Chronicle calls the clerk's job a part-time job with part-time responsibilities, which performs a largely ceremonial and bureaucratic function. Let's resolve this matter once and for all with a full-time elected city clerk. We can eliminate the deputy clerk and have one full-time clerk. We've had nothing but chaos in this office for 7 years. Used to be Peggy Hoyt was the clerk. Then we had Steve Capitan. Then we had Jennifer Jeep Johnson. Then we had Susanna, whatever her name was, and we had, many clerks. We need this to be a full-time, fair-paid position, and it needs to be an elected position. Thank you.
Thank you, Dwayne. Okay, I have a number of other folks who have indicated they'd like to speak on the clerk issue. Anyone would like to speak to that at this point, or would you like to wait until we get there? Okay, we have one other speaker, and that's Mr. Hillier, who'd like to speak on the marijuana issue, okay? Good. Or as we like to say, the cannabis, right?
Whatever you want to call it.
If you'd identify yourself, please, and we'll...
My name is Charles Hillier. I live over on 7th Street.
Right.
Taxpayer here for 30-some-odd years. My son lives out in Colorado Springs. I understand you all want to bring marijuana here to get the revenue, but I'm telling you right now, that's a mistake. The crime in that community has absolutely destroyed that community. If you've gone out to Colorado Springs any time past 20 years, it used to be a lovely community. It is not anymore. The homelessness is unreal. The juvenile crime rate in that town, because of all the charges of marijuana and stuff, is just horrible. Kids are going to jail before they get out of high school. One of the big issues they have is enforcement. We say it's going to be for the adults, but if you follow the state law, I believe they can grow up to 5 plants for personal use. Okay, how are you going to monitor their use in their own homes? You can't do that. The other thing is the federal law doesn't allow the marijuana dispensaries currently to use the banking system. So what they normally do is they put their money in a big safe. So they get millions of dollars bagged up, and then they do what they got to do to get it deposited. Okay, that creates a very high risk to the communities around them, because most of them places have to have armed guards. Okay, and I understand that, you know, in this day and age of guns and everything, that's one thing that the community may not want, is another person who's not a police officer walking around with a firearm. The property values out in Colorado Springs have gone through the roof, because what happens is all the marijuana merchants come in, buy all the empty properties up. They build all these grow operations, all these houses and warehouses, and once these places become totally destroyed inside from the smell and odor and all this stuff, then they just simply abandon the properties. They walk away with their cash and they leave these places sitting there. There are so many empty houses that you just can't inhabit anymore without doing total gut remodeling. It's unreal. And just, it's not good for the community. It affects, I understand it's a big tax boom for everybody, but the overall effects for the average local person in that community is disastrous. So I would encourage you to vote no for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hellier, appreciate it. Okay, does anybody else want to speak to this item, or any item on the agenda at this point on the agenda? Otherwise, we will move along, and when we get to the item that you have indicated you'd like to speak on, I'll try to get you on as soon as we possibly can. Okay, so let's move along to E, presentations. Court-appointed special advocates, CASA, FY 2019 Human Services Funding presentation. And CASA's Executive Director, Jill Olson, is here with us to provide this report. Hi, Jill.
Hi there. Thank you, Mayor, members of the council, and members of the community. I'm Jill Olson, Executive Director of CASA DeKalb County. CASA stands for Court Appointed Special Advocate. We are the designated guardian ad litem for abused, neglected children here in DeKalb County. So these are children who, through no fault of their own, are part of the court system because their parents have abused or neglected them. We have been here in DeKalb County providing these services since 1993, and we serve 100% of the abused and neglected children who have cases in the court system. We are the recipient of some funding through the City of DeKalb through the Human Services Initiative, and that funding provides some of our costs towards training. So our advocates are trained initially with 30 hours of classroom training and 5 hours of courtroom observation in the juvenile court system, and then they are required to have a minimum of 12 hours of continuing education on an annual basis. So obviously for all of this type of training that we do, we require funding to do that, and so the funding that's provided through the city is used to pay for those kind of costs. Children come into the court system, as I said, because they've been alleged to be abused or neglected by their parent or child, or parent or guardian. And in many instances, they come in through referrals to the law enforcement who perhaps are investigating situations involving domestic violence in the home. In the state of Illinois, if domestic violence occurs in the presence of children, those children are required to be removed from their home. The law also provides then that the case must be brought into court within 24 to 48 hours for a judge to determine that there is a basis for these children to be removed. Then DCFS is usually called in to provide services to this family with the goal of hopefully reuniting a family in this situation. In those cases where that cannot be done, then the children may be placed for adoption with their foster family or another relative. The CASA role in this is, again, a role of acting as their guardian at law. So we are there to advocate for what is in their best interest and make recommendations to the juvenile court. Here in DeKalb County, last year we served 209 children. Currently, we are serving 199 children, of which over 60% are from the city of DeKalb. So we are very appreciative of the support that the city provides to us to provide that funding. Any questions for me?
Yeah, let's see if are there any comments or questions of Jill regarding CASA. What a wonderful organization. I
Thank
mean,
you.
what you folks do. I've talked to a number of your volunteers, and it really is something, so. If there are no comments, thank you, Jill. Appreciate your comments.
Thank you again.
Appreciate your report. Thank you. Thank you. And for the benefit of the audience, we do have an ongoing number of presentations from folks like Jill, and from organizations like CASA that do, in fact, receive funding from our human services budget here in the city of DeKalb. Thank you, Jill. Appreciate it. I have no mayoral appointments this evening, so we'll go right to item G, the consent agenda. Again, all items listed on our consent agenda are enacted by one motion, unless one of our city councilmen want to request that one of the consent agenda items be removed, in which case we would do that. Tonight, we have 3 items on our consent agenda. Number 1, minutes of the regular city council meeting of July 22, 2019. Number 2, minutes of the joint review board meeting of April 26, 2019. And number 3, accounts payable and payroll through August 12, 2019 in the amount of $5,540,688.33. I would entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda as read.
I'd like to make that motion. Approve. Second.
It's been moved by Alderman Fagan, seconded by Alderman McAdams. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Smith.
Yes.
Fagan.
Yes.
McAdams.
Yes.
Verbic.
Yes.
Favor.
Yes.
Morris.
Yes.
Fanouken.
Yes.
Mayor Smith.
Yes.
8 ayes.
Thank you. Okay, now this is the point on the agenda, if you recall, if you've come in late, that we've moved up the ordinances section, the ordinances for first reading, item L on the agenda, to this point in the proceedings. So, on ordinances first reading, everybody at that point on your laptop or whatever, we will, I will read the ordinance, the first one, and we'll have a motion, a second, hopefully, and then I'm going to ask, in this case, Bill Nicholas, our city manager, to speak to this item. First ordinance, the ordinance for first reading tonight, ordinance 2019-054, amending Chapter 3, City Administration, Section 3.14, City Clerk. I'd entertain a motion, please.
Make that motion. Second.
It's been moved by Alderman Fagan, seconded by Alderman Favor. City Manager Nicholas, please.
Mayor, I think because there are people here wanting to speak to this individually, possibly, that they should have an opportunity to speak.
You want to?
Well, that's generally the protocol.
Yeah, whatever you'd like to do. Okay, well, then we have a number of folks. The first one is Mark Charvant.
Hey, Mark, how are you?
Again, try to keep your
3 minutes.
Your
3 minutes, everybody.
Your remarks to 3 minutes. Thank you.
Starting now. All right.
Okay, go.
First off, I'd like to thank the 5 of the 7 aldermen who were willing to either discuss this on social media with me or discuss this in person or on the phone. I'm sad to see that 2 of the 7 aldermen and the mayor did not decide to respond to any sort of email comments or anything along those lines. I would like to, Kay's letter saved me a lot of time, so I echo 100% what she said in that letter. It's a perfect description of what has gone on. I would also encourage everybody to seek out the email exchange that is public. Any emails you send to the city, for those at home who don't know, they can be made public, and they have been made available via Freedom of Information Act. They're posted on the City Barb's Facebook page, so please check that out. If you do go ahead and read the emails, it's going to give you a different impression of what goes on behind closed doors at this city. I found the exchange between our city manager and our city clerk absolutely embarrassing to this city. We all talk about working together, and when there's threats in emails against individuals stating that we're going to try to embarrass you, how does embarrassing our city help our city? I think that's absolutely disgusting. Bill, I appreciate your proposal that you're putting forth. At least there's some outside thinking, though I do have some problems with it, because if it does go through the compromise, it does take away what our city clerk is responsible for. So I certainly hope there will be no votes all around. I remind you of the referendum that passed. I know Kay mentioned it in her letter. 71% of the public, you guys represent the public. 71% of the public in the last referendum said this position needs to remain an elected position. So I encourage you all to please listen to what the public has to say, not what city insiders have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. DK Kolars.
Thank you, Dave Kolars, Ward 4. When all this started happening, I had a couple questions popped into my head. I know one of the complaints is that Lynn is not a full-time, or does not have enough hours. I'm wondering how many of the last 6 part-time city clerks kept the same office hours that the city building was open. I'm wondering if she's the first one to not keep full-time hours for a part-time job. I have not seen that mentioned anywhere. I know some might have. No, I'm not sure. I've never done business with the city to need the services of the city clerk, but I was under the impression that when you got the city seal on something, that would have been the last step in whatever process you were involved in. And I might be wrong, I don't know, correct me if I am, but if the city clerk is indeed the last stop to get that city seal on your document, should not the people in the offices that that person had dealt with kind of told the parties involved what the city clerk's hours were? They're on your office door, they're on the website, so if I came in and the department didn't tell me and I showed up on Tuesday, I would not blame the city clerk for that. I would blame the department I just came from. So that would be a couple of questions I had, something to think about. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Mark Scott.
Okay, a number of people have already talked about keeping it an elected position. We started the program with an American song for the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. And the rule is, the people rule. We vote. Now, I apologize to the city clerk, because until recently, when I started looking into it, I never realized how bad they butchered that job. What it comes down to, very simple, is that we decided we want this as an elected position. It needs to be a full-time position. Now, I'm sure that if we go through around, there's other position, or there are other things that the city clerk can do besides just stamp paperwork. Currently, if you want to get technical, the city is in non-compliance, because you've got the deputy clerk, First Alliance is to the city manager. We want the seal kept out of other politicians' hands. It is to be to the point where not everybody and anybody can have access to it. Secondly, is that when it comes down to the work, what needs to be done is, I agree with the article in the paper about some type of schedule. But at 10 hours at $8,000 a year, that's $15 an hour. There are people sweeping floors getting 20. you've got to cut them up with more hours and better pay than that, along with the fact that a lot of people I've talked to believe it should be a full-time, permanent position. So there are other things that can be done. Does the city have a controller? Yes or no? Doesn't anybody know? Huh?
Yes, sir.
They don't answer?
Yes, sir. Did you say
Yes.
controller?
Okay.
Treasurer?
There is one, right? And who's that person answer to?
City manager.
See? There you go. How much power do you need? You know, you couldn't do the job the first time, and now you're back. So...
Sir,
Oh.
please.
Okay. But anyways, most of the people are, and it's going to come back to the same old thing where we want the position to be kept as an elected position, and we want it returned to a full-time position. At a full-time position, you're going to get somebody that wants the job because they're going to run for the job. They're just not going to be handed to them. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. Appreciate it. Bessie Chronopoulos. With Steve Capitan on deck.
I'm sorry. I've been on my feet all day doing stuff. It just doesn't move like it used to. More Greek dancing for me.
Former Mayor Chronopoulos.
Yeah, been there, done that. 26 years of service to this community gives me a little bit of a heads up of knowledge of how a city is done. I have it better than most citizens. However, on this particular issue, the citizens are right on this issue. They didn't need 26 years of experience to tell them what it is that they want in, as far as their city clerk goes, as far as the city clerk's position goes. They said so in two, I think maybe even 3 referenda or referendums, depending on which is the correct way to say that. Overwhelmingly, they want that position to be elected. Now, there is not a single council member or mayor over the last 7 years, about 7 years, who really understands what a city clerk's job is all about, because you've never really experienced a full-time elected city clerk. You haven't. So you need to find out more information about what this position is all about. And everything that I'm saying is coming under the foundation of 2 things: the referendums, which were people motivated, and that is who we are all answerable to when we take an oath of office, and the whole concept of what the mayor has been telling me he's all about, and that is transparency. A full-time elected city clerk is answerable to the people. It's a nice checks and balance system that we need to have in an organization in order to prevent mistakes. Is it perfect? No, no system is perfect. But that clerk is answerable to the people, not the mayor, not the council, not the manager. Early in June, Mrs. Fazekas, Clerk Fazekas, put together some background information about what the clerk's position is all about. Nice historical accounting of what has transpired over the years and so on, with some suggestions and so on and so forth. She asked that that be distributed to council. And if you look at, I think, these emails, I had to cut and paste the old-fashioned way so I can keep it straight. I'm still not that tech-oriented. According to these emails, that distribution was thwarted. It was stopped. You know, the city manager apparently did not want to get this to the council. So Mrs. Clerk Fazekas distributed it herself. That was early in June. Why? Why did that have to stop? This document would have been an excellent starting point for the council to sit down over the period of a couple of COW meetings and talk over point by point what it's all about, what the clerk's position is all about, and yet that was stopped. Very not nice, very much not transparent, very bad practices. This is not what the city is all about. And That kind of thing has got to stop, or this city will not grow the way it can. And listen to the people, council and mayor, listen to the people. There's nothing more important than the people. Just because you've taken an oath of office does not anoint you with any special powers. You have given up your time and energy to represent people. That's more important than anything, as is honesty and transparency. Transparency, Bill, that's what it's all about.
Thank you. Steve Capitan.
Thank you, Mayor. Having served 12 years on the city council and 3 years as city clerk, I can't resist raising a technical point in the ordinance. Naming Lynn Fazekas in the body of the ordinance seems to me to be inappropriate. Reference to the office, not the person, is the appropriate language in an ordinance. I'm not going to take sides in the conflict between the city clerk, the city manager, and the deputy city clerk, except to say that they all have an obligation to cooperate to keep the office of city clerk open during business hours. It would be absurd for the $8,000 per year part-time city clerk to personally keep those hours. It would likely violate the minimum wage law, $3.85 an hour. I did the math. It doesn't even include city council meetings. Anyone who takes this position, the position of city clerk, takes the job of city clerk under the present circumstances, is making a sacrifice. Make no mistake about that. This is the elephant in the room that the city manager conveniently leaves out of his analysis of having had 7 city clerks in the past 7.5 years. When the public spoke in a referendum in November of 2012, decisively rejecting an appointed clerk and retaining the elected city clerk by a 70-30 vote. Contrary to the city manager's assertion, that the referendum proposed abolishing proposed abolishing the constitutional office. There is little difference between what is proposed in these ordinances and the language of the referendum 7.5 years ago. I think a professional thing to do would have been to put that referendum in the backup material. But I went to the county clerk's office and obtained a copy this afternoon after work. And I'd like to read that language of that referendum. Shall the city clerk in the city of DeKalb, Illinois, be selected by the city manager with the advice and consent of the mayor and city council rather than elected? In the face of the voters' decision, the council chose to make the city clerk's role a part-time position at $4,000 at the urging of the then city manager for the term 2013 to 2017. After going through 4 clerks in 4 years, the council raised the salary for the 2017 to 21 term to $8,000. We are now on our second clerk, and we are here today, and the council has not addressed the important issue. It is this issue of an underpaid part-time clerk instead of a full-time position with respectable pay. Please defeat this ordinance and give this issue the deliberation and public input it deserves. Please respect the will of the voters. That's the professional thing to do.
Thank you, Steve. Herb Rubin.
May I have 10 seconds of indulgence? I was just noticing after what Bessie said, I've been doing this for exactly half my life. I'm 75. I've been doing it for 37.5 years. And the thing that called attention to me, I always read because I'm an academic and I'll go 75 minutes and I write out 3 minutes worth of stuff. But I've noticed the font that I'm now using is dramatically bigger than the font that I used to use. So, I'm there. Okay, I will now start, and I hope this will be the 3 minutes. There have been vigorous discussions on social media arguing for maintaining an elected clerk. Meanwhile, the backup materials for today's meeting contains a reasoned argument of why the clerk should be appointed by the council, not by the manager. Unfortunately, neither maintaining the elected clerk nor instituting a council-appointed clerk will resolve the underlying issues that have led to the present impasse, and at times, especially in social media, acrimonious comments. Tensions will persist, and no mechanisms will be in place either to resolve the tensions or to prevent future reoccurrence. 2 further steps are required no matter what is decided. Council must work out the demarcation between purely administrative tasks that can be delegated to departments and those the clerk must perform. As part of doing so, the council and clerk together must assure that a deputy clerk is sufficiently empowered so the clerk's office is able to perform its functions during all working hours. In devising the system, council and clerk need to understand that while the clerk is far more than a recording secretary, his or her responsibilities are delimited by law and do not include supervising city staff or council. Second, while most clerks perform admirably, we do have the historic example of failure. We need clear written delineation of the clerk's responsibilities, as well as a way of monitoring that these responsibilities are carried out properly. And then, in the unfortunate circumstances of a clerk not carrying out his or her responsibilities, we require a set of rules that are fair to both the clerk and to the citizens for removing the person no matter whether elected or appointed from the position. Whether council maintains the elected clerk or joins the 30% of Illinois cities with an appointed clerk, these 2 steps must be taken, perhaps by postponing tonight's decision until there is a clarification of the division of responsibilities between clerk, deputy clerk, and the city administrative staff, as well as having in place a clear and fair set of procedures for removing a clerk who does not live up to his or her obligations. Thank you very much, and next time I'm going to even need a bigger font.
Thank you, Herb. Our final speaker on this issue is John Anderson.
My big question to you 8 elected officials that are sitting there, who put you in office? The 30% or the 70%? And Mayor, seeing you're the only other office that's citywide, like the city clerk, what happens if they get a little teed off at you and decide they don't want you? Did you ever think about that? But this, I see the American flag here. We're in a democracy. We're going to vote next election. You can put it on the ballot you want to do away with the voting, but I don't think you can get rid of it for the next election. And we'll all be voting. And we know what's going on here, and we're going to vote the way we want to. You're not going to appoint the way you want to. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Okay, those are our speakers from our audience tonight, and we do, as Mr. Charvat had alluded to, we want a healthy discussion, and I'm going to let City Manager Nicholas open up with comments that he has. I know I have a number, and I'm sure our council does too. So, Bill?
Thank you, Mayor. I'm not going to go in detail through the comments that I made in the background for tonight's meeting. My views were published with the agenda nearly a week ago. Since early January, we have published the agenda in a timely way and in a transparent manner, I believe, to allow people with differing viewpoints as we have tonight to know the essential facts well in advance of the council meeting. And this extra effort has hopefully made our local government issues like the ones before us tonight more tangible to everyone. Such transparency, I believe, is necessary for honest and open government. It sets the table for a dispassionate review of the facts, which is the basis for accountability, which is a word that's been used tonight. Nowhere is this more important than in local government. The facts are readily at hand, and our elected and appointed officials are very accessible. The curiosity tonight, to me, is the distance between the facts and a number of unfounded assertions about what actually occurred and what is proposed. There is no usurpation of the people's prerogative here. The constitutional office of clerk will be maintained. The duly elected mayor and city council will be the arbiters of what persons should carry out the responsibilities of that office, as they have been for most of the past 7 years. There is no removal contemplated. Clerk Fazekas will remain in office for the balance of the present term. There is no departure from the routine way the clerk's duties are conducted. Nearly all these duties will continue to be undertaken and professionally accomplished by Deputy Clerk Ruth Scott, according to the first ordinance. And Ms. Scott has performed them faithfully and well for the better part of 5 years, while appointed and elected clerks have come and gone with distressing regularity. However, there is something different and refreshing for DeKalb in what is proposed in the first two ordinances before you tonight. Sharp and clear accountability. At a time when we are trying to prove to business prospects that DeKalb's government is serious and purposeful, we have found ourselves mired in a fit of self-abuse over the city seal. The victim is not the city clerk, who fomented this tempest by standing above the local law. If the council does not approve ordinances 2019-54 and 2019-55, there will be two victims. The first is a clerk's office that should be responsive to the public. The other is our dedicated deputy clerk, who has chiefly borne the embarrassment that now clouds the office she has quietly served for years. This is the time to stand behind Ruth Scott and to hold Clerk Fazekas accountable. Respectfully, I recommend the council's approval of Ordinance 2019-54 and Ordinance 2019-55.
Thank you, Bill. I have a statement before we open it up to discussion by our city council. It was early June when City Clerk Fazekas and City Manager Nicholas voiced disagreement over an update report our clerk wanted to release to the council and the public. To me, at that time, it appeared that Ms. Fazekas and Mr. Nicholas had a basic disagreement over what the litany of city clerk elections and appointments over the past many years meant for the long-term role of that position. Following a rather unfriendly email exchange between Ms. Fazekas and Mr. Nicholas, it was clear to me that we needed to have a meeting to clear the air. I asked Ms. Fazekas, Mr. Nicholas, Assistant City Manager Ray Munch, Deputy City Clerk Ruth Scott to a face-to-face meeting. To quote verbatim, my email on June 5 stated to Ms. Fazekas that the meeting on Friday, while a partial focus may be on the report, meaning the report that Lynn had prepared, and Bill's subsequent progress report, my primary reason for calling the five of us together is to discuss teamwork and the importance of City Hall camaraderie. After Ms. Fazekas declined to meet, I shared with her my disappointment at her decision. Frankly, I still felt that we could move forward and at the very least have a peaceful coexistence between the offices of city manager and city clerk. I discussed this individually with each and every one of our aldermen. I had breakfast, lunch, if you recall, with each and every one of you. Each seemed to be satisfied at that time with the optimism that I had, and they felt that my optimism made sense. Little had I realized that the issue of the city seal and its unavailability to Deputy Clerk Scott while Clerk Fazekas was not in her office, that this would lead to City Manager Nicholas requesting an executive session after our July 22 council meeting to discuss what his office felt was a personnel issue impacting City Hall business. Following the discussion, with clear consensus on the part of our aldermen, I was directed to ask for Ms. Fazekas' resignation. I followed that directive, and following a very short discussion with Ms. Fazekas that took place after the executive session, she declined my request to resign. Now, since then, there's been a whirlwind of public sentiment concerning the city clerk herself and the position of city clerk itself. It has morphed into elected versus appointed argument, leading to the consideration of the ordinances that are before us tonight. As you probably know, it was my feeling that the appointment of Ms. Fazekas nearly a year ago was a good one. Daily Chronicle General Manager Eric Olson, in a column appearing in last weekend's newspaper, said I did this to foster unity. He was absolutely spot on. He called it an outside-the-box move. Mr. Olson wrote that it backfired spectacularly. Gosh, Eric, at the time I truly believed it was a good move. Now, as your mayor, I am perplexed, I am frustrated, I am disappointed that it has come to this. I am now at odds with one of my most trusted friends and my own alderman from the Second Ward, Bill Finucane. I genuinely feel that his publicly released proposal to amend this ordinance is nothing more than a Band-Aid of sorts. Likewise, I feel that the amendment does not respectfully address the arguments of our city manager, Bill Nicholas, who has skillfully crafted rationale for this council to change the way a city clerk is chosen. I cannot begin to tell you how much I appreciate Manager Nicholas's day-to-day performance since we appointed him to be our chief operating officer. He's done a yeoman's job. During church services yesterday, a line from a gospel reading from St. Luke stood out to me. I looked it up after Mass. It read, "Much will be required of the person entrusted with much." We as a council have been entrusted as individuals and as a body to do the right thing. Finally, as I wrestled with what was the best action for this city council to take tonight, I seriously considered asking council to postpone action on these ordinances. However, in reading through the ordinances, I've concluded that they do address some of the issues and make a strong case why appointing a city clerk makes sense. In the discussion that follows, I will see if city council agrees. And for the benefit of our media, I do have copies of those statements if you would like those after the meeting. So with that, I would open the meeting for any discussion. There has been a motion on the floor, a second, and we will move forward. Alderman Morris.
I guess from the beginning, I would have, or at any point in time, I would still love to hear more from both the city clerk, Lynn Fazekas, and from Ruth Scott. I feel like we've heard from so many different perspectives, but we have not heard from the two people that we're discussing. And I feel like that, while this may not be the forum, I feel like we can't have all the information without having done that in one way or another. I have some questions, and I guess I will just start with the most glaring question to me, and I guess this is one for the city manager, is how many times have documents needed to be stamped and resulted in not being stamped with a wait time over 24 hours? Can we quantify the problem that we're having here at all? Is there anything measurable going on here?
Yes, we can, and Ruth Scott has done that. And in quantifying, you look at the number of times that things were stamped by the deputy city clerk in the absence of the clerk, or would have been. And then you have to account for the number of visits people made, sometimes repeat visits, to come in hoping to just show up at City Hall, as somebody suggested earlier. Can I just show up and get my license? Can I just show up and get a copy of that contract? And it's not there, and it can't be there because it's not sealed and ready to be delivered. And that puts Ruth in a position of having to say, in respect to the city clerk, we're working on it, we will get it back to you as soon as possible. And on the second or third try, that makes us look bad. It's embarrassing not only to Ruth, but also to the clerk's office and to the city generally. So I think it was, I'm looking at Ruth in the audience, was it 30 times in the last number of months? Mayor, do you mind if I talk to the audience for a minute?
No.
Because
as far as I'm concerned.
That question is a legitimate question, and
Yeah.
I think it should be answered. 32 times. So 32 different customers seeking to complete their city business in a timely and responsive way.
So 32 customers who waited 24 hours, 48 hours, had to make multiple trips. What sort of category of problem are we talking about here?
I didn't anticipate you'd want to mince it that close, but in most cases, I have a front row seat and my doors are open. There's a door between my office and the deputy city clerk's seat, and she also serves as the executive assistant to the city manager and the assistant city manager. It's the middle office. And then there's also a door to the hallway, so I hear people coming and going, and it's been my approach since I was hired to be open. People walk in. Mr. Anderson has walked in any number of times in my office, and others have too. I welcome that. So I can hear everything that's done outside if I am distracted by it, or if people are upset, particularly if I'm listening for people that are not going to have their business dealt with in a timely fashion. That is a passion of mine. Even my detractors would admit that. And so I would say that the repeat visit was more typical than a one-time visit.
And the seal was shared up until a certain point. Isn't that the case? So when did it stop being shared?
I think at this point, Mayor, it's probably not fair for me to ask, but my friend and my associate and co-worker is a person who has the answers to all that. And if she's not willing to indulge your questions, then I respect that. This is a very trying experience for her more than anybody else because of her dedication to the job and the embarrassment that this has brought to the job and to her personally.
Additional comments or questions?
do we have some sort of thing in writing in our communication at some point that describes when the seal stopped being shared?
Well, I don't know the specific day if you're looking for that. I can tell you when the proposed progress report was presented to Lynn, or by Lynn to Ruth. We may as well put the story out there, the facts. It was a walk-in to Ruth's office, and rather than just sending it directly to the council, which could have been done easily enough, copied to me or not. And the note that went with it was, Lynn, give this to whoever you think is appropriate. And,
I'm sorry.
or
did you
excuse me,
name-
Ruth,
Yeah.
I'm sorry. And Ruth said, I will. And I was one of those people, and I looked at it and glanced at it, and I was concerned that there were some factual errors and possibly unintended misrepresentations, and so my response to Lynn was, I think we ought to talk. I don't want you to be embarrassed if I am to present what I think are the facts here, and that was refused. And at that time, and in that context of that conversation, this was early June, I learned that the clerk had been holding on to the seal, not making it available, even though on the day that the clerk was appointed, on August 18th, 2018, she actually signed a document and ironically sealed it herself, saying that she would, I think the language is, the city, no.
It's, I think it's in the
that she
background
would,
material.
abide by the section 3.14 of the city clerk, which includes allowing the appointed deputy clerks to conduct the business of the office as if they were the clerk, and that includes stamping documents. Pretty simple thing. And in recent weeks, it has disappeared altogether. I don't know if it's even in the building. But if I was, for instance, to refuse to do some part of my job, I would imagine that would catch your attention immediately. And so what I was asking for and what I've proposed in the ordinances tonight is accountability.
That's all I have for now, but I do have a number of other questions I want to give someone else a chance.
Thank you, Carolyn. Alderman Alderman Fagan.
You know, I listened to everybody that talked tonight, and I respect what everybody says. Herb, you brought up some valid points. I mean, there's a lot of people that came up, and there's been a lot of questions that everybody's got a suggestion, but nobody has an answer on how to do it. I think you brought that up in your conversation to us, and I appreciate that. One comment that was made here was when a person takes a city clerk's job is what it is now. They're making a sacrifice. We all made a sacrifice when we all decided to take this job. We get paid $5,400 a year, and I don't want to even think about what it comes down to an hourly wage. Alderman Jacobson had talked about increasing our wages. I don't want to see our wages increased. I don't want to see a job that pays $65,000 that someone can win on a popularity contest. You know, and what can we do when, you know, this problem didn't start, 8-7 years ago. It started 10 years ago, and it started with a full-time employment. And it's been going south ever since. Full-time didn't seem to work. Part-time doesn't seem to work. Appointment, I think that's the way to go. That's my opinion.
Thank you. Alderman McAdams.
In the early 1980s, my father was the appointed clerk of, the village clerk of Midlothian, Illinois, in the southwest suburbs. And I remember specifically when he was appointed to the position, we would sit around the kitchen table and we would talk about his job. And he felt beholden to the mayor because the mayor appointed him. Then my father ran for clerk and won. And my father changed his perspective, and he felt that he was beholden to the people that had elected him. And there were great stories around the kitchen table about the battles that took place between he and the mayor when he changed his position. I helped Susanna Herman get on the ballot in 2017, and I helped her craft her position on the clerk's position. Her position is my position, and that it should be restored to full-time, and it should remain an elected position. Susanna couldn't be here this evening, and I don't speak on her behalf, but I will report that one of the things that she told me when she was the clerk was that she thought that the associate clerk did an outstanding job and was extremely professional, but that she was afraid of the previous city manager. And I felt at the time when I heard that story that that's not how it should be. So I personally cannot vote for a appointment for the position, and I believe that the position should be full-time. My residents that have spoken to me on this have been unanimous in that position, and that remains my position today.
Thank you, Alderman McAdams. Any other comments? Alderman Fanouken.
Yeah, I'd like to offer an amendment to remove Section 3, Paragraph A out of the original ordinance here that refers to the city clerk being an appointed officer.
Second.
That's in Chapter 3, Section 3.
Section 3, Paragraph A of the proposed ordinance.
Okay. It's been moved and seconded that we amend the ordinance to
Remove Section 3, Paragraph A, referencing the appointment of the city clerk.
And Alderman McAdams, you second that?
Yes.
Any further discussion on the amendment?
Can we clarify exactly where we're saying? Sorry, go ahead.
No, this is in the full backup where the wording of the ordinance is. It's not in the
backup,
short
gotcha.
backup, it's in the full backup. Which was online.
So it's under Section 3, Bill?
Yes, sir. Section 3, Paragraph A, the heading there is appointed officer.
Right. Section 3, for the benefit of those in the audience, simply indicates, not simply, but indicates, Chapter 3, City Administration, Section 3.14, City Clerk of the city's municipal code shall be amended to state in its entirety as follows. And what Bill is suggesting that this be changed or removed. Is that correct?
Correct. The Paragraph A be removed.
A, appointed officer. The city clerk shall be appointed by the mayor with the approval of the city council. The city manager shall provide advice and recommendations to the mayor regarding the appointment of the city clerk. The residency requirements shall not apply to the city clerk as an appointed officer. The city clerk may be removed as an appointed officer pursuant to 65 ILCS 5/3 I1-35-10. And I'm not familiar with what that says, but.
Right, and so if I may, you know, again, I'll speak and echo what a lot of what we heard tonight, that the public expects this position remain in an elected position. We had over the years at least 2 referenda that have overwhelmingly supported that position. In light of that and the continued public comment, a majority of which I have gotten has been in favor of an elected position. That's why I offer this amendment.
Any discussion? Alderman Verbeek.
I consider the mayor and the alderman as representative of the people. I believe that we are those that are overseeing the policy, how we operate as a city, how we provide services to those that choose DeKalb as their home. I don't believe that, and again, we're held accountable at the polls. We as aldermen and mayor, we're not involved in the day-to-day operations of processing paperwork and customer service in that regard. We do provide customer service from a policy standpoint, from an oversight standpoint. So while I certainly understand what people have to say about why it should remain elected, I still believe that if the position is appointed by the mayor and the aldermen, that it is still a position of the people. We have not had, and again, we're held accountable at the polls, so if the public does not see eye to eye with what we offer as aldermen from a policy standpoint, then that's where it happens, is at the poll. Either we're elected or we're not elected. The clerk has additional responsibilities, which I believe that pay tries to recognize, of $8,000 versus the pay that we make as aldermen, for example. What I would say, though, is that our track record from a standpoint of elected officials, we have had some challenges recently with aldermen. That alderman is no longer with us, resigned. How do we keep ourselves accountable? How does the public keep us and the clerk accountable? We elected in the past a full-time clerk at a very good wage. The median household income in DeKalb is $39,000. I believe it was suggested earlier that the salary be $68,000. Again, I appreciate the opinion, but from a budgetary standpoint, then what do we take away from to make that happen? Or is it just something we should do because it's representing the people? Well, I will say that we represent the people, and that is why I support an appointed clerk, and unfortunately don't believe that the elected clerk process has worked very well for the city of DeKalb.
Any other comment on the amendment that has been suggested, and we do have a second on that? Alderman Morris.
It seems like we've had a few different suggestions. We had, Bill's original document that he made an alternative suggestion for this role. I think originally when Lynn's review of the office came out, I thought that we would have time to address this in our upcoming August workshop. And so I didn't address it sooner because I thought, we're going to address this in the future when we have a big workshop and lots of time to talk, lots of time to assess things, to consider all the possibilities. So I guess I was looking forward to that opportunity. I guess I was thinking that would happen, and I realized that I don't think it's even on the agenda. But we have a lot of different ideas going on here. We have a lot of community input. I think the majority of the community input that I'm hearing from every direction is the community has already spoken on this. And if we are representative of the people, we have to hear what they've already said. And I think especially making a move in the opposite direction of the way that the community has already spoken is indicative of us not hearing them at all. And I think I would caution us to move forward very slowly with this if we're going to take a move that's going to be in opposition of what a referendum has shown the people to want.
Alderman Favor.
So I had looked up the 2012 referendum, and I guess the only thing I would say in looking at the referendum, it was, as was read earlier, that it was the city manager would appoint the clerk. I would vote no for that as well.
Yeah, me too.
So as Alderman Verbeek had stated so very well, that I feel the same way that we're elected, we represent. I think if the mayor with city council approval, I like what was proposed. That, the last 7 years, we've not had a city clerk. Again, I haven't heard, other than asking just this evening, I haven't heard any other input from the city clerks in terms of what was the breakdown and what led to resignations. I don't know if that, I don't want to say that it was something simple. It could have been work hours, it could have been other things, disagreement with people. The disappointing thing to me is, as a city, we're trying to become more business friendly, and withholding the seal from someone who, the example I would give is someone came on Monday night, they got their license approved, they show up on Tuesday morning and the office is closed. They don't have the seal to get their license stamped. That's disappointing. That seal should be available, that license should be issued that next day. If I'm a business owner, I want to get started as soon as possible. So in terms, my thought, I'm also would advocate for smaller government instead of going to more full-time or higher salary position. I would go to a smaller government as well. That's the position I would have.
Thank you. Alderman Smith.
Well, I guess I'll be last since I've been listening to everyone. This is what's hard about this. I listen to everybody. And Bessie, you talked about 26 years, 36 years in government. Okay? So here's, I've been through it all. I started looking through every one of these documents, and yes, I've maybe learned from a couple people in this room to sit and read things very thoroughly. Thank you for that. 2015, we didn't have a city clerk. Who did the job when there was no clerk? No official city clerk. Question, can anybody answer? The assistant city clerk, one of two. I'm not sure now if we even have two assistants. We have one, if I'm correct. Ruth? We have two. Thank you for that. I'm going to back you guys up a little bit to my law enforcement days. We, as the police department, processed applicants for the city licenses. I can tell you how many occasions people would come in, we would fingerprint them. What came out of their mouth was, now I have to go try and get this sealed. Because they can't move any farther until they have the city seal on something. Liquor license application, we all know how slow the state moves, really. So the city wanted to be proactive, let's be fast. I got tired of defending the city simply, for the sake of the office. Not anymore. It's not going to happen for me. I started looking at the seal. Here, I'm going to quote something to everybody. If anybody hasn't read ordinance, bear with me. I got enough up here. Chapter 3 on the city seal. The seal herein provided is declared to be the common and corporate seal of the city, and shall be used in all cases which by the ordinances of the city or by law or custom it is or may be necessary for the city or any, quote, any department or officer, there's 8 of us up here, therein to use the seal. If I want to use that seal, where is it? Question, where is it? I think I have that right sitting up here. I will defer to legal if it's overridden, but as far as I see, Matt, that's sitting in our current ordinances.
I'd like to ask legal, Matt Rose from our law firm, before we vote on this amendment, and we do have a motion on the floor and a second to this, what does this do to this particular ordinance if in fact the only change that Alderman Fanouken suggests is that we remove, the paragraph 3 section 3 that he suggests we remove, and that is that the appointed officer section be removed?
It would have, of course, removed the section that would make it an appointed officer, the office of the city clerk. The only true substantive change other than that is I mean, the ordinance redefines, but it doesn't quite redefine new duties of the clerk. The only real substantive change in this would be kept intact is that there's a line that says the deputy clerk and the city manager shall at all times be responsible to ensure that all the duties of the city clerk are executed faithfully. Right now, the ordinance, the section 314 of the city code says that the deputy city clerk shall perform the duties of the city clerk as if in her stead, if the office of the city clerk's not there. This would augment it. The council has the legal authority to allow the city manager to execute those duties if necessary.
Bill, does that ring true with what you wanted it to do?
No, it does
Okay.
not, because as I'm looking at, the only part I'm suggesting be changed is whether it be appointed or be elected rather than appointed. It doesn't change anything in any of the other paragraphs of this proposed ordinance, just the appointed part would come out. Everywhere else, it just refers to the duties. My amendment just refers to whether it's elected versus appointment.
That's correct. I was addressing substantively if your amendment was voted and approved, substantively what would be the difference between the current city code and what this amendment would be. That's
Thank you.
pretty much the only substantive difference.
Alderman Smith, I just want to make sure that we understand before we vote on this amendment. Then, obviously, if our amendment passes, the ordinance itself, well, I guess the ordinance would be then approved just without that one section.
Mayor,
Is that
if the
correct?
ordinance is passed as amended, the proposition that was before the council in that ordinance has changed pretty dramatically from elected, or from appointed to elected.
Mhm.
That's the principal difference, is what the city attorney just explained.
I see, okay. Alderman McAdams.
Just to clarify, for those in the audience that are not familiar with all of the legalese, it appears that the yes vote would be that it would be an elected position, and a no vote would be that it's an appointed position. Is that correct?
Well, it would
To the amendment. On the amendment.
A no vote would reject the amendment. You would still have to approve the
Correct.
actual ordinance.
Right.
So are we prepared to vote on the amendment as outlined?
Mayor, can I finish?
Yes, Alderman Smith and then Alderman Morris.
I guess I have some more questions concerning duties. You know, we all go on vacation, we all get sick. The city still runs. I mean, the police department still has cops out there, the fire department still has cops out there. Fire department has cops, never mind, paramedics. Old hat, sorry, Jeff. If we don't have somebody else to take over, 2 or 3 deep, who are we really disappointing? Our citizens? Ourselves? I think so. I mean, if the clerk keeps the seal and's gone on vacation, business has to go on. What if something happens to the clerk? Can not city business go on, please? Is that not the right thing to do? I'm speaking, thank you. You know, I don't want more to say. I mean, I've got tons of notes here, pages of notes from every ordinance, everything that's been put out here. And from someone that's been here, I'm ashamed we're at this point. I am ashamed. I have lived through all these city clerks. I am ashamed. That's all I got to say.
I think I used 3 other words, but perplexed and disappointed and, you know. But anyway, Alderman Morris.
I just wonder if we aren't prematurely creating an ordinance that isn't well thought out and well crafted. And I wonder if there isn't already something in the state statute that is sufficient to cover this, that we're overlooking or that we haven't paid enough attention to yet. So, you know, I think that, I feel like we have to look at what is our real goal here with doing this, and what's our intent, and does it serve that purpose? And do we really need to be creating more rules for this?
Thank you. Any other comments? It's been moved and seconded that we amend this ordinance to include the removal of Section 3A, appointed officer. And then we move forward with, then we would move forward on, well, we would not move forward. That would be the amended motion. Is that correct?
We would
Ordinance.
first vote on the amendment.
Right.
And then after that, then we could vote on the ordinance, either amended or not.
Right, okay. Okay, are we prepared to vote on the amendment? City Clerk Fazekas, if you'd call the roll, please.
Fagan.
No.
McAdams.
Yes.
Verbic.
No.
Favor.
No.
Morris.
Yes.
Fanouken.
Yes.
Smith.
No.
Three aye, 4 nay.
So that motion is defeated. Correct. Okay, so we now move on to I need a motion and we can discuss this. I need a motion to,
Mayor.
It's already
Yes.
been moved.
We already had the motion
The-
done.
the-
oh, that's right, you already have the motion. I beg your pardon. Okay, now, any further discussion on the ordinance itself? The amendment itself failed, so. Okay, well, let's move forward on ordinance number 1, 2019-054, amending Chapter 3, City Administration, Section 3.14, City Clerk. Roll call, please.
Verbic.
Yes.
Favor.
Yes.
Morris.
No.
Fanouken.
No.
Smith.
Yes.
Fagan.
Yes.
McAdams.
No.
Mayor Smith.
Yes.
Five aye, 3 nay.
That motion passes.
Mayor, if I can make a motion to waive
Yeah.
second reading?
It's been moved that we waive second reading on ordinance 2019-054. Do I have a second to that?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we waive second reading and pass ordinance 2019-054. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Verbic.
Yes.
Favor.
Yes.
Morris.
No.
Fanouken.
No.
Smith.
Yes.
Fagan.
Yes.
McAdams.
No.
Smith.
Yes.
Five aye, 4 nay.
That ordinance passes. Let's move along to
Excuse
number...
excuse me, clarification, please, on second, waiver to second read. Don't we have to have 2/3?
I do not believe you do. I'll have to review that.
Can you answer that yet tonight?
Yes, I will
Because
answer that
It would mean
tonight.
significantly.
I understand. I don't believe you do. It would depend on what is in the actual city code itself. Under the Illinois Municipal Code, you don't need to. I just need to review the city code. And a home rule municipality does not need to follow its own home rule constraints either. So even if the home rule ordinance requires a supermajority, you don't technically need to follow it, but.
I know that we have discussed this 3/5 before. I thought it had to do with, when we waive second reading, if it had to do with a dollar amount, but I may be mistaken there.
There is I think you may be referring to, there is for an ordinance to take effect immediately, not, the normal, an ordinance typically takes effect 10 days after publication. To waive that requires 3/5 under the municipal code. That may be what you're referring to. I will look up if our city code requires a 3/5 for the waiver of second reading. However, as I said, that would be a home rule requirement that the council need not follow.
What's the wish of the council at this point? What do we do? Do we wait for the city attorney's ruling on this, or do we consider that ordinance passes? What was the amount?
It was a 4-3 vote.
5-3?
5-3.
5-3.
I'd like to make a motion that we postpone the vote until we have an answer to the question.
Here it is, in 204E, there should be a second read of all ordinances at the next regular meeting. This may be waived by affirmative vote of 2/3 of the members of City Council present. So 24E does require 2/3 of the members of council present to approve of the waiving.
Yep, that concords with my reading of the city council, of the city code. However, as I stated, it's a procedural requirement that a home rule unit can disregard if it feels that it wants to.
And who would determine that if it felt that it wanted to?
Well,
yes, I think we can do what we want to, and we want to be as transparent as we possibly can during this. So,
yeah, I mean, the determination would be whether that waiver, if it was challenged, whether that waiver would be upheld, and the courts would uphold that waiver, but we would.
At this point, I'm not prepared to challenge the waiver, but it's up to.
Well, I think that we haven't met the requirements of our own code, therefore.
I agree. I'm agreeing with you, Alderman
Right, and so
Finucane.
therefore, that it'll need to come back in 2 weeks.
There is a motion on the floor to postpone the vote, and there was a second, as a point of order.
It's been moved and seconded that we postpone this vote to waive second reading.
Yes, sir.
On this ordinance that we have passed on first reading. Is that correct?
Yeah, well, procedurally, that motion would be too late. There's been a vote. You can vote to reconsider. That would have to be brought by somebody who was in the majority.
Withdrawn.
Yeah.
Does anyone who was in the majority, in the five, feel that we should reconsider this?
The motion failed, so the majority is actually the three that voted against it. That's the prevailing side, because the motion failed according to our code. The prevailing side has the right to ask for reconsideration, and because under our municipal code, it did not have the 2/3 majority, therefore the 3 votes are the prevailing voting side on this one.
I agree.
So therefore, then we wait until 2 weeks from the night for second reading.
Right, it did, the second reading didn't pass.
That's what I'm saying.
Correct.
Yeah.
Right.
The first reading did pass, the second reading did not.
Correct.
I agree to that.
Good.
Correct.
Okay, now let's move along to number 2. Ordinance 2019-055, providing that the city clerk shall be an appointed officer of the city of DeKalb.
I'd like to move that we postpone this until next meeting, as it may be academic, as the other amendment has passed intact. as the other ordinance is passed intact.
Your motion, Bill, is to postpone?
Yes, sir, since it's mute, since the other motion passed intact that included appointing the officer, appointing rather than electing the clerk, and that's basically the same thing that this ordinance would do.
Okay, I have a motion on the floor. Is there a second to that?
Second.
Any further discussion?
Discussion, Mayor.
Yeah, I believe that it's not necessarily moot. I believe that you have to pass, I think they're companions. You have to pass this ordinance in order to comply with the provisions of Section 5219 of the Illinois Municipal Code.
You have to at least take a vote. You can choose not to waive second reading if the vote is a similar vote, and it would be brought back to the next meeting as the first ordinance would.
Okay. Does that jive with everyone's agreement at this point?
Actually, but you've got the vote out there, so, and it's been seconded, so we still have to vote on that.
Right.
Correct.
Okay.
So the motion on the floor is what?
It's to
Postpone.
Yeah,
Postpone.
Okay.
It's to postpone the second ordinance.
Thank you.
Which means that we postponed the first.
Well, you didn't postpone, there's, the first one was passed, there will
Oh, I
be the
see.
second
Yeah.
reading.
Okay.
So there's a motion now to lay on the table or to continue the vote on this second ordinance
see. Okay.
to the next meeting.
But we're going to have to wait 2 weeks anyway.
No, because that would be, if it was passed today, then there would be a second waiver, or there would be a second reading at the next meeting, unless there was waived. It appears that wouldn't be waived anyway, or there may not be a motion to waive it. So if it was passed today, then that second reading would be the next time. If it was not passed today, the second reading would have to be at the council meeting that would be in September.
I trust our city clerk is taking good minutes on what has been said up here. So the motion on the floor is to
Postpone.
Is to postpone. Okay, and it's been moved and seconded to postpone this ordinance. Any further discussion? Yes, Alderman Favor.
I'll just state the obvious. I think we should go ahead and approve this tonight on first reading. We'll wait till next meeting and approve second reading. Just a statement.
I think first of all, we have to vote on whether or not
Right,
we're...
I'm saying...
Right. And you think that it'll be brought back and we ought to vote on it?
We should
Okay.
vote no on this amendment, or the motion currently on the floor, and then approve the ordinance.
Okay. It's been moved and seconded that we postpone. Roll call, please.
Favor.
No.
To postpone it.
Morris.
Yes.
Fanouken.
Yes.
Smith.
No.
Fagan.
No.
McAdams.
Yes.
Verbic.
No.
3 aye, 4 nay.
That motion then has been...
Defeated. So now the original
Approved.
ordinance is up.
So now there has been a motion on the floor, was there, on this one?
No.
No, there is not,
Okay.
so.
Now we are voting on the original ordinance 2019-055, providing that the city clerk shall be an appointed officer of the city of DeKalb. Motion, please.
So moved.
Second.
Been moved by Alderman Favor, seconded by Alderman,
Verbeck. It was Verbeck made the motion.
I moved it.
excuse me, Alderman Verbeek made that motion, Lynn. Alderman Verbeek, seconded by
Me.
Alderman Fagan, that we move on this ordinance. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
I have a request to speak. I did too. This is a separate item.
I beg your pardon? With the consent of the City Council, is that fine? We can have two
Sure.
more speakers. I apologize.
There goes her.
I don't know what my hourly wage is, but we can discuss that at a later time. First of all, Steve Capitan, you say you wanted to speak to that?
I'm signed up for it.
Okay, thank you.
It's L2.
Right, I see that now, thank you.
The other one was L1. so-
Right. And John Anderson on deck.
Yes.
Yeah.
I won't rehash what's already been discussed, but I would like to ask, I have some confusion about the purpose of the second ordinance as well. Most specifically, Section 2. I read it, and I read it again, and I read it again, and I am totally lost. I would like an explanation of what the Section 2 means in plain language, please. And also why there's a need for the second ordinance. Obviously, there's some confusion among the council, too, of why there's a need for a second ordinance. So perhaps you could explain that to the public as well, please, and address what is Section 2 mean?
Section 2 just states that this is an act of the home rule municipality, and under Illinois law, home rule units have certain powers in the Illinois Constitution, Article 7, Section 6, and it says that this is an act under the city's home rule authority, and certain home rule acts can supersede any conflicting state legislation.
John Anderson?
Well, now I am confused. What's going to happen when it's on the ballot already in the next election, for an election of a city clerk and the mayor by the whole city? Home rule kills this now? Is that what you're telling us?
What'll happen is that this ordinance will be presented to the clerk of the county. There will not be, if this ordinance is adopted and there's no other referendum in the meanwhile, in the interim, there won't be an election for the office of the city clerk at the end of the current term.
At the end of the term?
The current term.
All this whole rigmarole that's been going on was all brought on because of previous councils, and we elected them. Evidently, we're elected people that don't know what the heck they're doing. And it's just taken away from the city clerk everything that she had, or what she or he. Because I know back in the teens and the 20s, a man was a city clerk, and he was there for, seemed like an eternity. But anyway, I don't know how you're going to straighten this out. Maybe you all ought to get a lawyer. But it doesn't sound like it's American to me. If you got to vote for these aldermen, and you vote for the mayor, the city clerk should be voted for. And I don't care what home rule these rascals down in Springfield give you. It just isn't right. It isn't right. You might as well have a hammer and sickle hanging on the wall instead of the American flag.
Thank you, John. Okay, now, let's continue the discussion. I'm sorry that I neglected to see that Steve and John had indicated they wanted to speak to this ordinance specifically. Any further comments? We are voting on the approval of ordinance 2019-055. Is that correct?
Yes.
Roll call.
Fanouken,
No.
Smith,
Yes.
Fagan,
Yes.
McAdams.
No.
Verbic,
Yes.
Favor,
Yes.
Morris,
No.
Mayor Smith.
Yes,
5 aye, 3 nay.
that ordinance passes. We would then reconsider this at our next meeting if no one desires to waive second reading on this ordinance. Thank you. Number 3, ordinance 2019-056, amending Chapter 51, Traffic, Schedule C, Parking Prohibited, and Schedule F, Limited Parking, Central Business District, as they pertain to regulating on-street and public lot parking in downtown DeKalb. I'd entertain a motion, please.
So moved.
Seconded. It's been moved by Alderman Verbeek, seconded.
That's fine.
Was it?
It was me, but...
Okay. It was moved by Alderman McAdams.
No, it was moved by Alderman Verbeek.
Excuse me.
Seconded by me.
Moved by Alderman Verbeek, seconded by Alderman McAdams. City Manager Nicholas.
Thank you, Mayor. I do want to point out something in the background that is worth noting. On page 13, toward the bottom, next to the last paragraph, there's a bulleted sentence that starts, "Several streets will be restricted to residents only." It should say, "will no longer be restricted." Makes a big difference.
Yes. Big difference, big difference.
Sorry for that. So, this is not a new topic. We've had good discussions at ward meetings. Councilmember McAdams has had 2 that I've attended, and maybe there've been 3. And we've had some people come from the historic 5th Ward North and register concerns about the restrictions that were part of the original Safe Streets initiative. And there's been a lot of good work. There's some background for the interested public, and just by way of reference in this agenda, describing how that Safe Streets initiative came to be and the different phases of it, and a lot of hard work was done both by the police department, by the council, by the neighborhoods. But as it was explained at the time, if we're successful, people may want to change. If we're not successful, people may want to change, and maybe people want to change just because it's not something they anticipated until they actually see it. They might not know. So I think all those were in play. Councilmember McAdams can correct me, but I think what we've got now represents a true consensus, and I'm not going to go through all the proposed changes here. This list would be codified if the council approves the proposed changes. There are a few others toward the end of the background which are referring very specifically to a lot, Elwood parking lot in the downtown area. We discovered, just as we thought we had put everything to rest, there are some businesses that front on Locust Street that don't have on-street parking in front of them. And so for a number of years, well, really since that eyebrow was created, it might have been 10 years, people have come to their stores or businesses by parking in the back and coming through without being alert to that. The original, the Safe Streets, or I guess the original proposal had restricted parking right behind those stores. So on a rainy day or a snowy day or whatever, people had to park further away and come in, and the business owners contacted me and said, can we just flip the reserved spaces from the back of the businesses to the center aisle and then the open spots back. So that's what that is about. It's a pretty straightforward change. So with that, we have Commander Woodruff in the audience and Chief Petrogallo, who have spent a lot of hours on this, a lot more time than I have, and they're happy to answer any questions you may have. I applaud their work. It's been very meticulous. A lot of conversations also with downtown business owners and partners.
Well, I remember having discussed this a number of times over the last year. I think it's significant that, that we are actually doing away with the request for permits, having, you know, on the streets. People can be given, what, 25 permits? And guest passes. We're not charging for those. We decided that, you know, there is no need for that. So, it appears to me that, again, we're addressing this. I'm sure that, I think, Alderman McAdams, you suggested that a number of folks had talked with you. We continue to try to be responsive to the residents, and we will continue to do that. But I think this gives a fair recommendation, if in fact we approve the ordinance, to changes that are needed.
Yeah.
Alderman McAdams.
I just want to echo that. I want to thank Chief Petrogallo and Commander Woodruff for work above and beyond the call of duty, and all of the assistance that they were able to provide for us. I really appreciate that.
Any further discussion on this ordinance?
Mayor, may I just add one thing? I'm sorry, Alderman.
Yeah, Alderman Fagan?
Yeah, this is for Alderman McAdams. And this is pretty much your ward.
Yeah.
How do you feel about it?
It was a lot of work, but I think it's worth it. We had mostly a consensus, largely a consensus, and I think it was a good way of answering the things that residents wanted us to do.
Okay.
Any further discussion?
Mayor, may I just point out one quick thing?
Yes, yes.
Two things I should have said. One is, we've had other discussions in our community in the last couple of months about the Safe Streets Initiative, and in the first ward as well. And the police department is currently conducting surveys in some of those streets that were noted as having some issues, either people wanting to move in the direction of safe streets, even though they maybe didn't have that for the last couple of years, or people wanting to move a little bit out of that. So that is a process that's going to come back to you in one of the next meetings so that we can address that as well. And finally, just a quick thing about why there's no charging. I think our two aldermen who have been in these meetings most recently can confirm that many of the people who had restrictions and they had to have the guest passes and so forth were quite incensed about that, because they had to call, and the phrase that we used, which seemed innocent enough, was alibis. And after, you know, on Thanksgiving and in Christmas, calling, say, hey, can I please, they felt that was too much. And so we looked at exactly what we had generated in revenue from the angst that resulted, and it was a little over $5,000, not enough probably to offset the frustration that a number of people voiced. So that's why we proposed no charge.
Alderman Faber.
So this is going to be coming up in my ward very soon. I'm curious how you came to the 12 guest passes. Was that like an average number requested, or how did we come to 12? Or it's just, it's very generous. And
I admit to being led on that number. So
through the discussions at the ward meeting and with community input, we felt that one a month might appease everybody that lived in the area and provide them enough parking with the temporary permit that would be able to let them accommodate their guests. Oh, also holidays are not in effect with this.
Enforced.
So is it one pass per month, or is it they get 12 passes at one time, so they could have up to 12 vehicle owners come over? And okay, thank you.
Yeah, they get 12 annually, and they can use them how they choose.
Sure. Okay, thank you.
Alderman Smith.
Not to get off topic a little bit about, good job, Scott, by the way. I know we talked about the downtown. Bill, or where are we at with that? I got a call on that. Am I being a little early? About some of the 15 minutes we talked about downtown. I think that call came based on the ordinance for tonight, sir.
there was one that you referred to me, and that, I don't know where that's going, I guess.
We should meet?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's others, so I think between Scott and I, if you have some
Well, we
time.
should probably meet with Commander Woodruff. too.
Again?
Yeah, again. He's
Sorry,
got a
Craig.
vest on tonight, too.
Thank you.
Any further discussion?
Mayor, signed up.
Steve Capitan would like to speak to this parking. Pardon me, Steve.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Nicholas, it's gratifying to see that professional managers can make mistakes, not just us that are elected, that seek election. I make plenty of mistakes on a daily basis.
So do I, Steve.
There are limits to there are limits to the ability of parking restrictions to affect non-parking behavior. I think that's something for us to keep in mind when we examine the impact of the Safe Streets, because that is a part of the Safe Streets effort. It's not related to these changes per se, but just as a reminder, I think we need to all keep that in mind. Thank you, Bill, you answered my first question on the irregularities on that. My last question is, what is the purpose, well, no, I got two there. What is the purpose of the reserved spaces, and how many have been purchased so far? Is this related to the downtown residence building that's going up?
No, primarily, but I'm happy to dish.
The reserve spots began, the discussion of that began a couple years ago when, yes, the new buildings were being put up downtown, increasing the density in the apartments significantly down there. So we were concerned with some of these lots getting a little bit smaller from some of the construction, and as well as just a lot more residents down there. So we began the discussions with the downtown merchants, all the downtown residents, going all the way to 7th Street from 1st and 7th, about Oak or so, down to Grove. Getting their input on all of this and the discussion on what they would like to see, as well as these reserve spots, in order to make sure that the people that live down there do have a place to park without what they've always done in the past, jumping back and forth between the different parking lots. As far as how many's been sold, I did not look up that number before I came over tonight. It's not a ton yet, but also the buildings are obviously still under construction.
Well, that's why I was wondering if this was primarily intended for the reserve or for the new building. Why was there the move to pass it if they're not really a demand yet? Is what I was wondering. I'm not opposed to it. I'm just wondering.
It's simply to incentivize the control of the parking. The downtown residents, as well as the existing downtown residents, as well as the new apartments, are the ones that are taking advantage of it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. And Chief Petrogallo, and Commander Woodruff, and City Manager Nicholas. Okay, any further discussion? Roll call.
Fagan.
Yes.
McAdams.
Yes.
Verbic.
Yes.
Favor.
Yes.
Morris.
Yes.
Fanouken.
Yes.
Smith.
Yes.
Mayor Smith.
Yes.
8 aye.
That motion passes on first reading. Is any council member want to move to waive second reading on this?
Move to approve and waive second reading.
And approve the ordinance?
Second.
It's been moved by Alderman Alderman Fanouken, seconded by Alderman Verbic, that we waive second reading and approve this ordinance. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
McAdams.
Yes.
Verbic.
Yes.
Favor.
Yes.
Morris.
Yes.
Fanouken.
Yes.
Smith.
Yes.
Fagan.
Yes.
Mayor Smith.
Yes.
8 aye.
That ordinance ordinance passes. Okay, now if you recall, if you were here earlier, we moved the ordinances section of our agenda tonight to accommodate the many people who were kind enough to come in and give us their comments. And as you know, we spent considerable time on at least two of those three ordinances that were brought to us before this council tonight. So now we are at what was originally H on your printed agenda, public hearings. And so I'm going to open this public hearing on the 2019 annual CDBG Action Plan Amendment at 8:06. I'm going to ask City Manager Nicholas to speak to this item.
Thank you, Mayor. Just very quickly, this public hearing concerns formatting changes in our 2019 annual CDBG action plan. It does not change the dollar amounts that the council has previously approved, but the requirements of the federal government are that we should, because there is a formatting change, it should come before a public hearing. That's what this is about. We have an action item later on in the agenda.
Are there any members of the public who wishes to speak to this item? If not, we close that public hearing at 8:08 p.m. Now moving on to considerations. Item I, confronting chronic disorderly houses in the city of DeKalb. I'd like to ask City Manager Nicholas to speak to this item, please.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to open this up. Sorry for hitting this at the late hour, but I think it's very important, and I hope we can spend a little time on this. Two council members in particular, Mike Verbeek and Carolyn Morris, have approached me in hopes that this particular consideration could be fleshed out a little bit for tonight's meeting, and I hope I have at least kicked off the discussion by providing some background, and there are some people in the audience who are here possibly also to speak to that. Clearly, we've had some unusual occurrences at rental properties, very specific rental properties in our community in recent months. The attention of the city's departments and by many not-for-profits who have been there to assist tenants has been focused mostly on the Hunter properties, specifically the Hunter Ridgebrook properties at 808 to 832 Ridge Drive, also around the corner at 835 Edgebrook Drive, the old College Square complex, or three-quarters of it, and also Hunter Tri-Frat at 930, 934 Greenbrier, and also 1024 West Hillcrest Drive. And these complexes, consistent with our crime-free housing rules, have been considered chronic disorderly houses by our administration. They have been, the Hunter management has been given notice to appear at administrative hearings, which are going to be held on August 26th, to answer our complaints. All this does is, I think, give us a springboard toward looking at how is it that and I'm not going to rehearse, I think we all know that there were arson attempts and one successful arson that led to people throwing themselves and children out of the building at 808. There was a fire also at 930 Greenbrier, both of which have led to the temporary closing of good portions of those complexes, which means people have been dislocated and having to find other places to live, possessions damaged, maybe lost, and so forth. So what is our framework for good practices by people who own and rent property? A lot of effort went into the creation of the regulations we have in the books. We had the participation of a number of private associations and lots of public partners. One of the key drivers in the creation of our present framework was the DeKalb Area Rental Association. Dara, president's here tonight. Will Heinisch, still president? Oh, past president, I'm sorry. Was it just tonight that you became past president? Okay. I think it's fair to say that nearly all local landlords follow the high standard that the council has set in our DeKalb Tenants Handbook, and the council's been very attentive to keeping that updated, and just recently on July 8th passed the most current upgrade. Nevertheless, we have a situation where we have if we have a business model whereby on part of Hunter Properties whereby they are not eager or even willing, except under some pressure, to remedy property maintenance problems, but also evidence of crime, criminal incidents of crime, and we have to take them to court to try to press them to attend to these things, and when we win judgments, they don't pay them, and we have trouble enforcing those judgments. Because then it moves into the arena of having to file liens and so forth. I started to talk about the effort that the council made going back to 2012 and coming forward. The council established a crime-free housing bureau. And the initial mission of that bureau was to hold landlords accountable for their tenants' behavior. And the structure for that enforcement was a three-strike system. I have played that out in your background. And Carl Leone, who is here, I believe, they're sitting in the back, has been the coordinator of that program for a number of years. And initially, the success of the bureau, I think, can be attributed to a number of things. First of all, we were aggressively enforcing, and also the focus stayed with the behavior of the landlord. Were they complying or not? Over time, previous city managers had moved property maintenance more squarely into that bureau rather than maybe as a separate thing, and that tended to dilute the focus. We have restored that focus in the last couple of months. Carl is back now with the police department and operating the bureau out of the police department, where we can continue to focus on the crime behavior that's occurring. And as you can see in my opening remarks, we are going to be in court on August 26th to make two different Hunter properties explain why they have tolerated crime and criminal behavior in their properties. There is also, I think, a very formidable piece of research that's been done by our police department, trying to objectively place all of our apartment complexes into a context so we can compare and contrast what's the experience at these various larger complexes. And it's part of your background. It was posted on the city's site, so I hope the public has had a chance to review it. It's very telling. There were 9 of the largest complexes with 150 or more units. And Hunter now has, by the way, over almost 1,000 units, and leads the pack to the nearest competitor by 200%, with 920 incidents just in the last year. We've also tracked the incidents of crime at the Hunter properties, which shows that from about the time of their purchase to the present, we had a very remarkable spike in the number of police calls at a number of these properties, not all the Hunter properties, but most of them. And that spike only begins to flatten or come down as a result of a lot of intense police pressure and involvement. Frankly, unsustainable involvement with the current force that we have. That's a matter of concern. If you haven't had a chance to read through this report, I urge you to do so. It's a very objective and telling document. So where are we? What can we do to resolve the issues that former Chief Lowry told me, and I think he repeated it to you on the floor in public, that if we could see better management and more cooperation from Hunter Properties, we would see our overall incidence, E-N-C-E, of crime at these places drop in double digits almost overnight. So what can we do to make that happen if they're not going to be cooperative? Well, there are a couple of things. Enforcing judgments is not easy, as we've seen. Over the last year, cases brought against Hunter Properties are really case in point. By mid-March of this year, over 530 cases have been filed against Hunter Properties over the previous 12 months. $105,376 in judgments had been reached, but only in 116 of those cases. After further appeals by the Hunter legal team, the city finally prevailed on $93,000 and change in fines. We have not received a penny for that, because the court, having issued the judgment, now is basically out of the picture. They don't enforce the judgment. We have to seek other means to enforce those judgments. So fines aren't in these extreme cases, and the extreme cases are now becoming proving the rule, I guess, that we are not going to be very successful. Other communities have addressed this. Oak Forest is one, and thank you, Councilmember Verbeek, for pointing that out. We've done some research there. We have some similarities to Oak Forest. They have attempted to do some things that we are finding also useful as new owners and managers come on the scene. We do require that they have attend a crime prevention course, an 8-hour course with our police department. Oak Forest has a similar program. Oak Forest is, I believe, doing criminal background checks on tenants over 18 years of age. The most recent state statutes, though, I think require that we not or prohibit us from doing those background checks except on convictions. We can't do it on arrests.
Right.
We can't exclude somebody from renting on the basis of an arrest record. It has to be a conviction record. Am I correct?
That's a recent amendment to the Illinois New Rights
Okay.
Act. The landlord can restrict.
Okay.
the lease.
One other thing we can do as part of our model crime-free lease contract, and that is require renter's insurance. That is done in Oak Forest. I don't believe we require renter's insurance. There are advantages, obviously, to that. We noticed, for instance, a number of the people who were burned out or forced out of the Hunter Properties in the last couple months didn't have insurance, and that's an economic issue, of course, but it also may be an issue that people are not quite sure why would I do that? Is it worth the money? And well, it is really worth the money. It covers belongings in the event of the damages that we've seen. It covers injuries that might happen in an apartment, and in many cases, you can buy more insurance, obviously. It helps where sometimes in lawsuits and where legal fees are applied, at least within limits. Someone sues the renter, it provides some protection, and also typically provides some hotel and motel expenses, not for an unlimited period of time, but for some period of days after you've been dislocated, which is a critical time for families especially. Criminal prosecution. Now I'm departing from what I've been saying about the Oak Forest experience. There are other layers and levels of criminal and civil prosecution that we can pursue. I am reluctant in this context to explain what we are pursuing unless we telegraph every one of those moves. But I can tell you that we are looking at the state level and also at the federal level to see what we can do. I should give credit to Eric Olson, who wrote very recently that these experiences that are making the headlines at Hunter Properties have been a real wake-up call. We certainly won't dispute that. Our success going forward really depends on the partners that we have, though, with not only tenant associations, with DARA. The DeKalb County Housing Authority has been a very willing partner working with us. The Office of the State Fire Marshal has been working with us even today at 1100 West Lincoln. HUD is also very interested in the experience that people are having in these city rental areas, and a variety of local not-for-profits, the state's attorney, and NIU is interested in helping where they can. So with that, that's an overview. If we just had one silver bullet, we would have put it in here and we would say, this is what we're doing, and we will produce results for you, detailed data to show that we are doing it. But we are still reaching for a number of bullets, I guess. And we're going to have to do that in tandem with our partners and in good cooperation with a lot of people.
You know, among the many partners you mentioned there, Bill, among the many partners you mentioned there, I think you just forgot to mention DARA, DeKalb Area Renters Association. Did you? Yeah. They've been so helpful on this. So, great background. Great background. I know, and this city council knows, and this city should know, that we're trying our darndest to do the best we can to work with those who, at Hunter Properties, who just seem to snub their nose at anything that we try to do. So, Alderman Verbeek, I think Alderman Morris, you asked Bill to bring this to the City Council as a resolution or as a consideration. Do you have any comments? If you would like to, I feel that it would be appropriate that you make those comments at this point, and anybody else can add what they'd like. Thank you.
Yeah, I would just say this discussion started with former Alderman Dave Jacobson and I talking many months ago about comprehensive rental standards. And I think an excellent discussion for council and mayor. It's not something we're going to be able to resolve in one evening. I hope it comes up during our strategic planning session this Friday. But it's just obvious that what we're doing is not working. We have Safe Streets initiative that's been working. Let's now have Safe Housing initiative that's working. I can tell you that doing the research, the Housing Authority of DeKalb County is very successful. They require a criminal background check and therefore have far fewer incidents than some other property owners. One's been named this evening, but that's not the only place where places that we have issues. So I'm just asking for council to discuss, consider what is best for the people of DeKalb, the tenants, what will most protect them, keep them safe, keep them healthy. I want to continue being a welcoming community to everyone. So how do we best balance that is what I'm looking for.
Thank you. Alderman Morris, would you care to make a comment or not? I'm not asking you to.
I'll wait. Go ahead.
Okay, you want to pass? Okay.
Sure, I'm sorry.
Alderman Fagan?
Yeah, I just want to thank the two aldermen for bringing this up.
Yeah.
Because it's not only for your wards, I think it's for everybody in town
Sure
here,
it is.
you know, the city. And we want to, for the consideration, I would say, direct to the city manager, do as much as you can possibly do. I mean, when we have owners that, as the mayor says, thumb themselves, their nose at us. So, I mean, with rental insurance, you know, if you can get them to do that, that would be great. Criminal prosecution, I mean, I don't know any other way to get their attention. If we could get that, I would appreciate it. Thank you.
Alderman McAdams, and then Alderman Verbeek.
I think this highlights, I used to be in debt collections. It's very difficult to pierce the corporate veil and enforce a judgment, and I really appreciate that the city has done everything that they can do to try and to move this forward. When you have a landlord that will not respond and will not listen to the judge, it's tough.
I guess our city attorney is advising me that we can reveal something of that strategy that goes to the next level, as you two have mentioned.
Yeah, we are seeking to enforce those judgments. The first step that we're taking for that is our citations to discover assets post-judgment proceedings. That will require the owners of the Hunter properties to present to the court what assets they have, if any, beyond the properties, and that will be backed by the contempt power of the court. But the problem fundamentally is you can change the owner, you can change the owner's behavior, and it's an economic problem that you have here. These judgments here in total are $100,000. You have 1,000 Hunter rental properties that are renting out at approximately 700, $700 a month, 1,000 units. You can do the math there. There are state statutes that we cannot enforce that may not rise to the level of the state statute, but the remedies there would allow for a relief that would have the rent be turned over to the court while the property owner comes into compliance with the criminal neglect of the property. I can't say whether there's such a case for that or not. It's not something that falls within our domain. Our ordinances are extremely robust. I've done a review of similar municipalities that have had crime-free ordinances, but DeKalb has, in my opinion, one of the most robust and vigorous crime-free ordinance. The problem is that your tools of the enforcement are limited to affect the economic behavior of particular owners here, and that's a different question, and it's a policy question. It doesn't mean that we're not going to continue to aggressively enforce our ordinances. We're going to do that, right?
That's what we're doing tonight.
Yep.
The discussion of that. Yeah. Alderman Verbeek?
Yeah, in the research from Oak Forest and other communities like Aurora that require a criminal background check, the data is there, it works. So how do we best deploy that strategy without penalizing all property owners? So I think that's the key, is that I don't agree that it should be all property owners that have to pay for the shortcomings of a few. So how do we address those problems without making rental property owners, I guess, go through more steps that maybe aren't necessary?
Councilmember Verbeek, I'm just thinking of this, maybe we could tie that the cost of that background check, there's a cost, there's time, and there's money, to that strike system.
Okay.
We'll see. We'll have some conversation and bring it back to you.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? Thank you, Bill, for bringing that to us, and a special thanks to Alderman Verbeek and Alderman Morris for bringing that to our attention and requesting that it be a consideration item. Thank you. Okay, we move to item J, resolutions. Number 1, Resolution 2019-119, approving a substantial amendment to the Community Development Block Grant Annual Action Plan, 1-year use of funds for program year 26, which runs from April 1, 2019 through March 31 of 2020. Entertain a motion, please.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved by Alderman Morris, seconded by Alderman Smith. City Manager Nicholas, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Just very quickly, the allocation remains the same. The actual spread of the dollars is on page 6 and a table on the top of that page in your background. We have in our 5-year plan a focus on 4 different categories: owner-occupied housing, rehab, public services, public facilities, and improvements, including infrastructure and administration, which to some extent reimburses our very able Joanna Rouse, Joanna's in the back, dutifully sits through lots of things because this is very important to her. She is our point and does a lot of work, and also is very informed about HUD procedures, so that we go through all these various layers. This is almost like working with the FAA, not quite as detailed, and as it should be. And we have some carryover, as you can see. There's a big difference between what we had planned to spend, $439,000 and some change, and the additional carryover funds, but there's a clock ticking on that use of the carryover funds, and we can't just decide for ourselves. Every dollar we spend has to be approved by HUD. Joanne just came back from a couple of days of HUD conferences and made some headway in some projects that are very specifically needed in the city of DeKalb. So I'm looking forward to getting that money going in the right areas.
Okay, you're recommending approval of this resolution. It's been moved and seconded that we do that. I'd just like to say that in my conversations with Joanne Rouse, I can't believe what she has to go through to fulfill some of the HUD requirements in terms of record keeping and paperwork. It is unbelievable, but she does it, our departments do it, and I appreciate that wholeheartedly, believe me. Any further comments or concerns? Roll call, please.
Verbic.
Yes.
Favor.
Yes.
Morris.
Yes.
Fanouken.
Yes.
Smith.
Yes.
Fagan.
Yes.
McAdams.
Yes.
Mayor Smith.
Yes.
8 aye.
Thank you. That resolution is approved. Item number 2, Resolution 2019-120, authorizing an intergovernmental agreement with the Illinois Department of Transportation for architectural, engineering, and construction management service funds from the Downstate Public Transportation Fund in an amount not to exceed $150,000. I'd entertain a motion to get this on the floor, please.
So moved.
Second?
Been moved by Alderman Fanouken, seconded by Alderman Favor. City Manager Nicholas, please.
Thank you. This resolution authorizes an intergovernmental agreement between IDOT and the city. The intergovernmental agreement states that the city will draw down $150,000 from a grant that had been allocated to us in 2013, and that money will be utilized to cover our local match for funding the architectural and engineering services associated with the new transit operations and maintenance facility. We're very appreciative of the support we get from IDOT, and it is, in this case, directed toward a much-needed new and bigger facility to deal with the merged bus system that the city is now operating.
Again, this resolution is recommended for approval. Any further discussion or comments?
Just real quickly.
Yes, Alderman Fanouken.
The city and the DSAT's been working on this for years, and this is the first real concrete sign of movement forward to getting this project done. So definitely vote yes.
Great, thanks.
Thank you.
Roll call, please.
Favor.
Yes.
Morris.
Yes.
Fanouken.
Yes.
Smith.
Yes.
Fagan.
Yes.
McAdams.
Yes.
Verbic.
Yes.
Mayor Smith.
Yes.
8 aye.
That resolution passes. Number 3, Resolution 2019-121, authorizing an amendment to the agreement with the Illinois Convenience and Safety Corporation, IC and SC, as it pertains to updating potential and existing bus shelter locations. Motion, please.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved by Alderman McAdams, Alderman Verbeek, seconded by Alderman Fanouken. City Manager Nicholas, please.
15 years ago, the council, another council, approved an agreement between the city and the Illinois Convenience and Safety Corporation for the placement of bus shelters around the town, and at that point, we had a more modest idea of how many we needed and where they were going to go. There have been a lot of changes since that time. More recently, we've seen some shelters constructed in our community along Annie Glenn Road, Locust Street, Health Services Drive. Some of you, I assume you've all seen them, and they're working. They're reasonably attractive considering the cost and so forth. And this just updates that list, and it will help, basically defines where these shelters are within our area, and we recommend your approval.
Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Morris.
Yes.
Fanouken.
Yes.
Smith.
Yes.
Fagan.
Yes.
McAdams.
Yes.
Verbeek.
Yes.
Favor.
Yes.
Mayor Smith.
Yes.
8 aye.
Thank you. That resolution passes. Number 4, Resolution 2019-122, authorizing the solicitation and execution of real property marketing listing agreements for various vacant city properties. I'd entertain a motion, please.
I'd like to make that motion.
Seconded.
Motion made by Alderman Fagan, seconded by Alderman McAdams. City Manager Nicholas.
Thank you, Mayor. This will look familiar. We had a resolution like this on May 28th and then also on June 24th. And what you have authorized previously and what I hope you will authorize tonight is that we proceed with the setting up for sale the last of the low-hanging fruit, I guess you would say. These are primarily residential properties that are in residential zoned areas. They were single-family lots, some of them legal non-conforming, some of them conforming sizes. They had dilapidated buildings on them. They were raised by the city at the city's expense. We'd like to sell them, use the money for other purposes. There are other parcels from here not included in this list that I think a number of them we'll have to talk about individually, and it's partly a planning as well as an economic question, but these I think are pretty straightforward. A couple of them are just slivers that are of interest to an adjacent property owner, maybe because it makes their property, if they were to buy it, legal and conforming. It gives them a little more side yard or backyard or whatever. The framework is similar to the other two resolutions. The listings would be advertised through the MLS system to afford access to any interested broker, and then there are provisions for what the contingency fee agreement would be if it's sold just through a broker without another real estate broker involved, or if there were two involved, and different percentages and split. So I wish I could say we've sold some of these properties previously, but I think we need to get them out there. And believe me, I'm leaning, because so far I've got change to make our move. We'll get it.
Yeah.
We'll get it, I'm confident.
Thank you. Any discussion on this resolution? Roll call.
Fanouken.
Yes.
Smith.
Yes.
Fagan.
Yes.
McAdams.
Yes.
Verbeek.
Yes.
Favor.
Yes.
Morris.
Yes.
Mayor Smith.
Yes.
8 aye.
That ordinance passes. Moving right along, item K, ordinances for second reading. We have none this evening. If you recall, we have discussed at length ordinances 1, 2, and 3 under item L, so we will move now to city council reports. This is asking each of our members if they have anything to report or communicate. First Ward Alderman Carolyn Morris.
The residents of those properties that we discussed today are still having problems, and I'm still hearing from them regularly that they cannot go in and get their stuff, and then when they did go in and get their stuff, it was stolen, and these sorts of stories. So I just don't want us to forget them as we move forward.
You know, I don't believe we've forgotten them, and I appreciate your urging us not to forget them. I understand. Are you aware of any planned concert to aid the victims of both the DeKalb and Sycamore fires?
Has that one passed? I'm sorry.
Sycamore
Is it coming
event
up?
happened.
The Sycamore event.
Sycamore had one, but I believe Mike Embry and his group is trying to organize a program for later this month. So let's keep that on our radar screen and see if Mike isn't here with us, excuse me, tonight. But we ought to do that because it would certainly be another worthwhile effort to address that issue. Anything else, Carolyn?
That's all.
Okay. Alderman Fanouken?
Just a reminder that NIU classes start, excuse me, start 2 weeks from today. The main residence hall move-in is Friday, August 23rd, which also happens to coincide with the first day of Corn Fest.
Be a busy weekend. Alderman Smith.
Real brief, I had Third Ward meeting at Oak Crest. This is the first time Oak Crest has ever invited anyone. It was very, very nice. Alderman Fanouken and I attended along with City Manager, Chief Petrogallo, and things went really well, very well obtained, and we asked to come back, so that'll be taking place. A lot of questions. Chief McMasters, I did not get my dessert, sir. Thank you.
Yeah, I want to commend you, Tracy, and I want to commend our 3 new city aldermen, Alderman Morris and Alderman McAdams and Alderman Smith. You've all stepped up and had your ward meetings, and really appreciate it. I just think it's proof positive that here's a group that really cares about what it is we're doing. We care about what our citizens are saying, and believe me, I appreciate it. So thank you very much. Alderman Fagan.
I just want to say, CASA had their 50 men that cooked on Saturday, and we had Chief of Fire Department that was out hawking his desserts. They were excellent. And also Alderman Verbeek. Actually, he brought some in. I don't know if a couple of them are left.
There's 2 left.
There you go. But I just want to say what a great cause and a great turnout they had. I've never seen that many people at this fundraiser, and the food was excellent.
Thank you. Alderman McAdams.
No report.
Alderman Verbeek.
In addition to NIU starting back up, let's all take a watchful eye about all the little ones. The public schools are set to start this week, so please use caution as you're out and about. Thank you.
Alderman Favor.
Nothing to report.
I'd like just to remind everyone that this city council will be taking part in a day-long workshop on Friday, the 16th of August. We will be meeting right here in tandem with the Finance Advisory Committee. Finances will be but just a small portion of what we are going to be talking about in what Mike Verbeek alluded to as the strategic planning session. We, again, in the attempt to try to keep this as disseminated as widely as possible, we're going to telecast that full day's proceedings from 9 o'clock to 4 o'clock on Friday. So I would invite any of you who may be watching in the audience tonight, or any of you who maybe want to watch portions of that during Friday, to please do so. City Clerk Fazekas, do you have anything to report?
Yes, I do. There was a question earlier about what happened to previous clerks, and what they were going through. And so I have a couple of quotes from two of my predecessors. One is Liz Peerboom. This is a portion of the reasons that she gave for her sudden resignation in September 2014. So Liz said, "I knew that I would have battles, but I could not have imagined how much I would have to battle every day. They break all kinds of rules and tell me that I don't know what I'm talking about when I raise a concern. They don't like me because I call them on it. I don't have an office or even a desk, so that tells you what they think of the position. I feel like I failed the voters, but the roadblocks the city puts up were too much for me." And then former clerk Susanna Herman. She said, "Having a watchdog doesn't help if council members don't take it seriously when you bring concerns to their attention. I shared my concerns with them regarding the conduct of the former city manager, and I shared my concerns with some of the aldermen regarding the lack of support and communication I received from staff throughout my time there." So, in writing and talking with others about the plight of the DeKalb City Clerk's office, I have continually tried to focus on the local codes and the positions involved and not on the individuals currently occupying city offices. The problem is a systemic one, and in part it can be solved in applying laws in the correct way. However, the current situation points to another important piece of the solution, and that is the style of the leadership DeKalb often chooses to employ. I read an article the other day that states it well. Good leadership leads by example. Toxic leadership leads with brute force. As we work on solving these systemic issues, we in government must do it in a way that treats every human being with respect and takes care not to create casualties of anyone. In my writings, I've called it the morality gap. In general, the people who live and or work in DeKalb and who distrust and dislike their city government, they feel that way because they want respect and fairness, and their government too often fails to meet expectations. We in government must catch up to the moral level of our people. We must do better. We must set a good example.
Thank you, Lynn. City Manager Nicholas.
No report.
We do have an executive session scheduled, and I need a motion to hold the executive session on the following items. Approval to hold an executive session to discuss, number one, personnel as provided for in 5 ILCS 120/2C1, and number two, to discuss pending or imminent litigation as provided for in 5 ILCS 120/2C11. I'd entertain a motion to recess into executive session.
So moved.
Seconded.
It's been moved by Alderman Favor, seconded by Alderman McAdams, that we recess into executive session. Roll call.
Smith,
Yes.
Fagan,
Yes.
McAdams.
Yes.
Verbic,
Yes.
Favor,
Yes.
Morris,
Yes.
Fanouken,
Yes.
Mayor Smith.
Yes.
8 aye.
We are now in executive session. We adjourn this meeting for executive session. Thank you.